everyone. I want to welcome you to this creative conversation. You're in for a real treat today. Before I get into who our guest is, I actually want to introduce myself. If you are new to me or only briefly know me, my name is Laura Khalil, and I work with entrepreneurial women who want to get book solid, working only with clients they love, and double their revenue this year. Yes, really. And so on this show, what we do is we bring on incredible entrepreneurs in creative areas to inspire you, to hear their story, to learn from their journeys and how they have risen. And today, we are joined by my friend and my personal inspiration, Kate Bryan.
You're Kate, my inspiration.
We can just inspire each other all day, Kate. Kate is the founder of One Girl Revolution, which is a platform that exists to uplift women, and she's going to tell us more about it. Kate is going to be talking to us today all about how she has garnered national PR coverage for One Girl Revolution to help spread her message. And we're going to learn how you can do that for your enterprise or business as well. So Kate, welcome.
Laura, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. And you are such, like I said before, you are such an inspiration to me. And I just am so grateful for your friendship and this sisterhood that we've created.
Can I just say to the audience, so the reason we met, it's funny, I just did today, my roundtable. It's called the More Clients Roundtable. I run it for everyone listening. It's the second Tuesday of every month. And people say to me, well, I'm scared to reach out to people. And today we talked all about cold outreach. And what I think is really funny is that you and nobody introduced us. I don't know if I reached out to you or you reached, I don't even remember who reached out to who, but we were like, this is a cool person. I want to know this person. And we have wasn't it even before the pandemic? It was, right?
Yeah. I think that we had been messaging back and forth. And again, like, I agree. I don't know who reached out first or whatever, but then finally we were like, should we just get coffee? Like, should we so we went to that spot in Detroit. I'll always remember it, and hit it off.
Canal.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And so when I just say this to everyone who is scared of reaching out to people you don't know, there's nothing to be afraid of. And sometimes they might actually become your friend. And so Kate, let's start. First, tell us a little bit about why you started One Girl and what it is.
Yeah. So One Girl Revolution is a social platform and podcast that highlights the stories of everyday women that are changing the world through their lives. So, little girls sometimes. I've interviewed a 5-year-old that makes coloring books for children in hospitals, all the way up to grandmothers or retired women who are helping people in the community, whether it's people that are experiencing homelessness, survivors of human trafficking, so many different topics, so many different issues. And some of these are big stories where they founded a big organization. Others are just, some little initiative that they're running out of their home. And the whole purpose of it is to remind all of us that we can make a difference through our lives. It doesn't have to be the big things always. It can sometimes be the little things that we can make a difference through.
And one of the reasons you and I connected is around podcasting. So it's interesting because I hear, this isn't really a podcast specific episode, but a lot of people say how do you get people to listen to your podcast? How do you increase downloads? What do you do? And a lot of it is just having really great content and making sure it gets out there. Obviously, that's probably the most important thing. But you have this background in public relations, and you decided to put it towards One Girl. And I'm curious, how did you even think about setting One Girl up for a success, so to speak, with journalists?
Yeah, so I had studied public relations. I did a master's degree in public affairs and political communication. So for a long time, I thought I was going to be a political pundit or work in Washington, D.C., which I did for 7 years. And when I was in D.C., I felt like there were so many stories that weren't being told by the media, and not just women and girls, but there were so many stories that I felt were really inspiring or really profound, but the media is really busy. I mean, at the end of the day, reporters have a lot of things they have to cover, and sometimes they don't have time to cover the stories that I felt they should be covering. So
Mm,
that's really, to answer one of your first questions, was, how did it start? And it really stemmed from that. I noticed that there was a
mhm.
need for women and girls stories to be highlighted, and to be highlighted in a different way. And that's what I love about podcasts, is it's more long form for the most part.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more space to tell a story. It's not just like, oh, here's 15, what do you, tell me your story in 15 seconds, or
Yeah.
what are you doing? Tell me about your organization in 15 seconds, which a lot of times is what the media is dealing with, because they have to fill so much time, but then at the same time, they don't have a lot of time to tell a story. So I started the podcast because I felt like there was a need for these stories to be told. And it didn't really start out as a podcast idea. I started it as a podcast, but at first I always had this vision for video. So I really wanted to do like a video series where each episode would be a different woman's story,
Mm,
but that would have cost a lot of money, and it would have been a lot of time. And podcasts obviously take a lot of time to do as well, as you well know, but
yeah.
it was an easier way to kind of start. So it was like kind of a soft launch. And so I started by just thinking I would do 10 episodes, and then that continued to grow, and more episodes, and I kept finding more stories, and then friends would send me stories, and then now we just hit 125 episodes. So
That's
a lot of great
incredible.
stories. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you wanted to highlight these stories because they're not being talked about. I mean,
Mhm.
it's interesting, like from as a person, I used to do PR in some of my earliest jobs working in tech. And you realize really quickly that these reporters are inundated with press releases, with irrelevant content, with the, it's just like people have a list. Sometimes, I mean, at least when I was learning, you had to learn how to be really specific and target people because people were getting spammed left, right, and center. And you had incredible success. This was it. Was it this spring
It was this
with
spring. It was March, Women's
I can't
History
believe it was
Month.
that long ago.
Hmm.
But you got one girl on Good Morning America, which, oh my God.
It's crazy.
What?
Laura, I still can't believe that it happened. Sometimes I like look at the clip, or like today I was sending one girl's website to someone, and that's on the homepage. And I was like, did that actually happen? Like, really? But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you want me to tell the story of like how that came about.
I do, because I want people to understand some of the routes and paths to actually getting national media attention. So
Mm.
tell us about like did that happen?
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite stories to tell, because I always say that it's PR 101. You don't have to have a background in PR. You don't even have to work in PR to be able to emulate or do exactly what I did. So, my background's in media. I have a lot of connections with producers and editors, and, I've worked in so many different realms. And so you kind of would think that maybe I went down one of those paths to get Good Morning America. But the reality is, one day, right as the pandemic hit, so March of 2020, I was on Facebook and I follow Good Morning America. I'm like interested in the different programming that they do and the stories that they're highlighting. And I randomly saw, Laura, a Gmail email address. So a producer had gone on there and they were looking for something random. It was like dating horror stories from West Virginia, which I didn't fit into. Like, I'm not in
What?
West Virginia. And so even that, like, I didn't fit into what they were looking for, but there was an email address. And so I was like,
Mhm.
I have nothing to lose. Like, this might go nowhere, but I may as well email them. And like you said, they get all kinds of emails. Most likely I'll never hear back from them, but it's worth a shot. So March 2020, I emailed this producer and I was like, hey, it's not even about one girl, but I was like, I have all of these amazing stories of women and girls that are making a difference during the pandemic. That was when we didn't really know what was going on and how we were actually going to come together, or what people needed really. But here we did at One Girl Revolution, we did 10 ways to make a difference during the pandemic. And so I started with that, and then that list continued to grow. I think it's like 15 or 20 now. And then we started highlighting all these women and girls that were making a difference, that were
It's amazing.
feeding those in need during the pandemic. writing letters to the elderly who couldn't leave their homes, who were sheltering in place, who were lonely, young people that had used technology to reach out to populations that were lonely and isolated, and all these different stories. So I emailed this Gmail email address and said, hey, I have all these great stories of women and girls that are making a difference during the pandemic. I think it would be great to highlight any of them. If you see a story that you think would be interesting, let me know and I'll connect you. Never in a million years, Laura, thinking that they would do a story about one girl. So fast forward throughout that year, you know, different things were happening with One Girl. I released this short documentary, The Girl Inside. When that came out, I emailed
Which
them.
is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I am so obsessed with it. It's on the One Girl Revolution website, right?
Yeah, it's on
People
YouTube.
have to go see it.
It's so easy. So just go to onegirlrevolution.com. You can find the documentary there. And thank you, Laura. It's like, that was such an important project that I got to work on. But when that came out, I emailed the producer again. So it's kind of like, I always tell people, it's kind of like dating. Like, you don't want to be like the psycho that over emails people or like over text people. You got to kind of play it cool. So that year I was like, okay, September rolled around. I hadn't heard anything. And they wrote me back and said, thank you for my original email. So they did write back.
Okay.
The original email that day, they wrote back and said, thank you so much. We'll look into this, but never promised anything. So I waited a couple months. September, the documentary came out. I emailed them again. And then at Christmas time, I think I sent them I usually do a One Girl Revolution gift guide that supports different women-owned businesses and organizations. And so I emailed them a total of 3 times throughout that year. Never heard anything back in the second 2 emails. And then finally in January 2021,
yeah,
I get a phone call from New York City at like 9:30 at night. Of course, I didn't answer it because I was like, it probably is some sales call or some creeps or whatever. I didn't answer it. And then a couple minutes later, I see that I have a voicemail, and I listened to the voicemail. Laura, it was the Good Morning America producer calling me to say that they were considering doing a segment on One Girl Revolution. And I just about passed out. Like, I had to like sit on my floor because I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, what?
Amazing.
So I finally like mustered up the courage, called her back, and super long story short, they recorded a segment on One Girl Revolution. They highlighted a bunch of the stories of women that I had interviewed on the podcast, which was amazing. So it gave them a platform and an opportunity to speak as well. And then, it ran for Women's History Month in 2021, which is great.
It's amazing. And I have to say to our audience, so as that was going on with Kate in the background, I was reaching out to the New York Times because
I love this story.
I was following I'm calling Kate. I'm like, should I talk to the New York Times? There's this lady looking for like people to chat with her. She's like, talk to her, become a resource to her. And that's how, and that's actually, I messaged her back. She was looking for something. I messaged her back. She ended up featuring me and some other women in a profile in New York Times, which is how I got in there, and is actually continued to be a resource and source for her, which ended up getting some other people I know press in New York Times. So I want to ask you, like, it's interesting because this year goes by almost where you don't hear from them, and you're like, okay, don't be a creep, just like reach out once in a while. But when they call you back and they're like, we're ready to rock and roll, I have to imagine that you also have to be ready to move quickly. Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, and they ask you questions too. Like, it was not a done deal when they called. It was like, hey, we're interested. Why? The question that she asked me, and I'll be really honest with everybody who's listening, is she was like, why should we do the segment? Really, like, matter of fact, why should we do the segment? And I jumped right into, I was like, why wouldn't you do the segment? These are all these stories. These are all these amazing women. Like, we all, you know, if you're doing something and you could pitch a story about anything, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a podcaster. It could be about your business, but you always want to have your little like 60-second pitch down, right? Like, you want to have a couple of different stories or a couple of different story ideas or angles that you could pitch. And that's what I did. And I don't know that I was totally prepared, but I like jumped right into it. I was like, these are the stories that I'm covering, showed a lot of diversity. not just in location. So I have some Detroit stories because obviously I'm based in Detroit, but I cover stories all across the country,
Yeah.
all different ages, all different backgrounds, race, all different stories. And so I pitched a bunch of different stories, and they were like, we'll look into it. And then next thing, it was like within 48 hours from that phone call,
Mhm.
I was recording the segment. And so you also have to
Wow.
just be ready to like jump in. My sister is here, my apartment, like tacking up fabric so it looked like somewhat nice, because it was during the pandemic, so they weren't quite doing
Oh,
studio shots
okay.
yet. So they were like, we'll do it via Zoom. And so yeah, we like had to put lights up. We were like taping lights to different things. And so you just always have to be, if that's what you want, if you want to get a TV hit specifically, like you have to be ready. Like I always tell people, get your Ring camera, like just
Yeah.
have your things ready. It's easier if you're talking to the New York Times because you can just do it over the phone, or if you're doing a radio interview, most of the time those are over the phone. But like if your dream or is to get on Good Morning America or be on TV, you got to have that home studio ready to go, because they might not be able to get you to New York, or they might not be able to
Right.
get you in studio. So like, just be ready.
I love it. Can you talk to us a little bit about, do you know what the impact of that has been for the women that were highlighted, or for One Girl itself? What do we know about that?
It's been incredible for all of the women, and I know that they would say that. And what's interesting, Laura, is even with the podcast, I didn't really realize how I can see the impact. Like I can see the numbers, I can see the listeners, I can see the shares. But and I've stayed in touch with a lot of the women, most of the women actually that I've had on the podcast, but you still don't know. And
Yeah.
one of the women that they had on, they asked what the impact was, and it was so beautiful because she shared how it was the first time that she was just really given the space to authentically tell her story. And that's really the power of podcasts. Um, and yeah, so I think that it opened up a lot of opportunities for these women to be seen, to be
Mhm.
heard. Some were just pictures of some of the guests that I had on, but even then it was like so beautiful that they got to share
Yeah.
it and say, "Oh my gosh, look at my picture was on," and then reshare their podcast episode. And I just think that for the organizations that were featured, it gave them so much publicity as well. It just put them on a totally different realm. And my hope is from that segment, Laura, is that it's going to open up more opportunities for me to pitch, and I'm already trying to do it, segments on some of the women that I have on the podcast, so that I'm able to
That's
say,
amazing.
Good Morning America, you should have Najah Bazzi from Zaman International on, or Amy Peterson from Rebel Now, or all the
Mhm.
different women that I've highlighted, and really kind of feed these stories to the media. And like I had shared with you many moons ago, become a resource for these
Yeah.
producers. And that's my greatest advice for anybody who's listening.
Become a resource. I think it's incredible. I want to say, because you mentioned having the space to share the story and what one of your guests said, for some of those who are listening to this, but probably many don't know, some of you know, I did a story for NPR almost 2 years ago. It was February 2020, came out on Valentine's Day, about discovering my 9 half siblings through genetic testing. And you guys can go listen to that story. Just Google my name and WDET and it'll pop up. But there was something, so, in terms of like, why do we want press? Why does it matter? Why is it important? Well, some people have a story that they really want to share, and not just for themselves, but because that story is going to help other people heal, know that they're not alone, know that there are resources out there for them. And I think that, a lot of times we can see PR in this very like myopic way of like, what is it going to get me? And it's like, yeah, okay, that's, maybe it'll get you something, but also, what does it give others? How does it like strengthen a whole community? And that's why I love what you've done so much with One Girl. I think it's just building that whole community is completely amazing, Kate. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much. No, thank you. And it just continues to grow. And also, I will say too, Good Morning America was such a huge opportunity, but those opportunities, it's not always the end all be all, right? Like it opened up so many opportunities for me. And I think a lot of times we get kind of pigeonholed or stuck thinking, okay, if I just got this TV hit, if I just got Good
Right.
Morning America to pay attention, then I'll get the recognition, and then I'll
Then
get
you'll
the
make it.
funding. Yeah,
Yes.
I will be totally honest with you, Laura. I did not get $1 million check after One Girl Revolution was on Good Morning America. It's part of my journey. It's been part of
Yeah.
the One Girl Revolution journey, but I think that's also important for people to recognize. Is like we sometimes, put on a pedestal having an opportunity like that, or even you being on NPR and doing that series, like it's such a great opportunity, but it's only one step in our journey. And so don't get
Yes.
caught up chasing something because it's just going to be a stepping stone, a piece in your journey too.
Kate, that is like such brilliant advice, because I remember doing that thing for NPR and everyone said to me, I had friends over at the Detroit Free Press and Detroit News, and even the station, they were like, Laura, this is going to blow up. This is going to be huge. And, one of the things I always wanted to do was write a book about it, but I don't want to write the book on my own dime. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to, like, I'll write the book, but we're going to have to find an agent to get me a deal. And I remember when it came out thinking, okay, get ready. Here we go. We're going to like put the gas on. Of course, this was in the midst of, it was February 14th, 2020. We're beginning to get worried about the pandemic that is dominating the news cycle, rightly so, rather than my rinky dink story. So none of that happened. But to your point, Kate, it was a stepping stone on the path. It's sort of like, I see it as like, all our lives are built up of these experiences, like we're building, like putting bricks in a house, and you get to decide what that house looks like, and or pieces of a mosaic, and you get to create that picture and that fullness and that beauty. But to think that one thing is going to shoot you to the moon is maybe that does happen for some people, but I always prefer to think that an overnight success is 10 years in the making. So, I think that's what people don't see as often, is all the work on the back end that you and I and our listeners are doing. I want to ask final question, Kate. What advice do you have for people who are like, okay, it seems like I might be able to do this? What would you recommend? If there are a couple tips you can give, you'd recommend to people who have no knowledge of PR, who are like, yeah, I think this could be really cool for me.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, utilize Twitter. So reporters are all on Twitter. A lot of times, like, Laura, and your opportunity with the New York Times really kind of sparked out of a reporter sharing that they were looking for sources. So follow, if there are reporters that write on topics that you're interested in, or maybe your business is focused on a particular topic, fashion, for instance, for it is a total random example. Follow every single fashion reporter, blogger, podcaster, anybody you can possibly think of on Twitter, and look for those opportunities to be a resource for them. Maybe it's not even pitching yourself. Like, even with me, it was like I pitched Good Morning America on any of the stories, never thinking that One Girl was the story that they would actually come back to me. So use Twitter to get in touch with people. It's so easy to get in touch with reporters that way. I would also say take the chance. Like, if you see a segment on Good Morning America that is of interest, or something that like you're working on that you think Good Morning America would be interested in, find their email address. A lot of times it's easier than you think to find producers' emails, whether it be on Facebook or other social media, or connect with them on Instagram and then message them. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. And sometimes those cold calls can have such a massive impact, and just keep doing what you're doing. And I think humility also, I'll leave you with this. This will be my third point. Humility is so important. And a lot of times we kind of sit in our own silo and think about, why not me? Like, I love Mindy Kaling, the comedian, The Office, the Mindy Project, all the different things. And she wrote this great book, Laura, called Why Not Me? And she starts out talking about, like, at first she used to be like, why not me? And like, why not me? That person's getting this. And like, kind of this victimhood culture. And then she finally was like, no, why not me? Like, what? Of course I can do this. Of course, like, why not me? And so I think there's a line that we can walk where there's like a humility, but also that, like, why not me? Like, I should be able to, where it's not that you're saying you're attacking somebody else, or saying that somebody else is not worthy of that attention. But to actually just say, I should be out there. I want to put myself out there, but also like, seeing the value in other people's stories too, and elevating them where you can.
I love it. And I love that very subtle but important shift in the why not me. It's like being a victim of your history or rising to the occasion and being like, all right, I like to see it as if they did it and they're awesome, I can do it too.
Right. Exactly.
Why can't I do it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Nobody's going to come and save you. Go save yourself. Go figure it out. You can do it.
Right.
If other people have done it before, it's possible. Kate, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Can you say once again where people can go to learn more about One Girl?
Of course. And Laura, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a great time spending time with you and everybody who's listening. If people want to find out more about One Girl Revolution, they can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. The podcast, the One Girl Revolution podcast, is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you listen to podcasts. And like I said, there's 125 episodes. And then if you want to watch The Girl Inside, our documentary, check out Good Morning America or any of the other stuff that we have going on. You can check out our website at onegirlrevolution.com. So it's the number 1 girlrevolution.com.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Laura, thank you.